So now we are on the state of Maharifa. Now we've discussed about the perpetual states that need to accompany us during the process of wayfaring. So we spoke of desire, intense yearning, and love of God. Now we shouldn't think of them as sequential sort of things that we have to desire God and then that culminates into yearning and then that culminates into deep seated love. No, it's a perpetual thing. Desire may not culminate into intense yearning, and intense yearning may not culminate into deep rooted love with God. And sometimes intense yearning can fade away, and then we have to reignite that desire. Sometimes the intense yearning is not distinguishable from love. In fact, what we mean to say here is that there has to be that inner connection with God through which the inner motion can happen. There has to always be that sense of objective, not only in the mind, but at the level of the heart. So there has to be the involvement of the heart at a very personal level, whether that is at the level of desire or it acquires a deeper state of yearning, or it flows naturally into wanting to give ourselves over to God, which is an expression of love and melt away in God. The reason why it has to be an inner affair is because we are talking about giving ourselves over to God, and that cannot be done until and unless the heart gets involved with God. So these are perpetual states that we must have. Similarly, another perpetual state that needs to be acquired is recognition of God. And recognition of God is again something that is gradational. It has its intense moments and stages, and similarly, it has its weak states and initial stages. So, when we talk about recognition of God, we have to talk about it from a very basic level. At the very basic level, recognition of God is that there is God, and God is our ultimate objective, and nothing other than God means anything. Now, that has to be there at the back of our minds. That then needs to deepen in the sense that we need to fully recognize that actually me saying that God is my objective is not sufficient. I need to work into it more carefully. So then we say, well, if God is my objective, then in that case, I need to understand that anything less than God is not worthy. And therefore, I begin to loosen my attachment with other than God. So it has to work in that way. Similarly, sickness and health, if they are means to arrive at that deep seated recognition of God, then those things cannot preoccupy us, overly preoccupy us. We need to see them as things that are comfortable but momentary, uncomfortable but momentary. But more than that, we need to see them as means for the recognition of God. So we say to God, well, these are the properties of the body that have befallen me in order to relieve me of this bodily identity and attachment. And I need to work towards you. Then, when we work more deeply into it, we begin to understand that the love of this world, the love of life, our inner preoccupations are actually distractions. And we need to fully understand God at that level that God is my objective. And instead of being preoccupied by the world, I need to be preoccupied with God. Now, here of necessity, we come to a stage where the mind needs to engage in reflection. Through reflection, what we mean is we observe the nature, the way everything is operating, the way everything is working, to then understand that yes, God is beautiful. and I can see this displayed through his handiwork. God is merciful, and I can see that through the charitable nature in which he has created things. God is all knowing, all capable. So, this is at the level of the mind when we reflect upon nature and the mind opens up to the nature of God through reflection upon nature. Here, what we come upon is a state that the masters describe as rationally deducing the existence of God, where the example that they would give would be that if you see a shadow, you will conclude that there is an object casting that shadow. Or the other way in which they explain is, well, let's say you have never encountered fire and somebody describes fire to you, that it burns everything that comes in its proximity. It can give its light without losing its own light. You have this description in your mind. Then at the next level, you actually see smoke and deduce from there that there has to be fire that gives this smoke as an effect. Going beyond that is when we embark upon dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intensively and excessively. What that does is it invites the presence of God. This is a finer level of recognition of God, not through the mind, but through the feel factor, experiential knowledge, where we begin to feel the presence of God. In terms of our analogy, it's when we feel the heat of the fire. We know the fire is there. I can feel the heat. At this point here, when the presence of God makes itself manifest to us, it is not something we see through our eyes. It's not something we hear, but we feel the presence pretty much like the feeling of the presence of love when we feel that intense love and the presence of the beloved through the love. A very sort of a watered down example would be the presence of something that is causing fear. We have these premonitions and we feel this presence of something that is bringing fear in the heart. So the presence of God is actually felt at the level of the heart, and we know that this is true presence of God. This is a surest level of recognition of God, that God is. Now, at that point, we can deny the existence of our own limbs and the existence of objects, but we can't deny the existence of the presence of God. Now, let me just explain that just for a few more with another example. When our mother at times gets annoyed with us and she says something which at the face of it seems to be displaying her hatred for us, we know in there that she doesn't hate us. We have that confidence in her. This is the level of confidence we feel at that level in the presence of God. That I know, I can feel what I feel, just as I know that my mother loves me despite her apparent anger. It's something that you know and you attest to the presence of God. Now, going beyond this, recognition comes to a ripened state, which is one of witnessing God. Now, it's amazing at that level, we are witnessing the world, and it's not the world that we are witnessing. We know we are witnessing another reality altogether, a thinking, living, able, conscious reality. And at that point, finally, we begin to lose ourselves in that reality. We become the observed and we become the observer. And that is the finest level of the presence of God, intensified and recognition of God. This is something gestured to within the later part of Dua Arafah, which is attributed to Imam Hussein. It The last part of it may not be Imam Hussein. It may be some of the other masters who have attributed it to his name, but I've always understood it to be Imam Hussein Salamullah alayh, from the way we see him on the day of Ashura. In any case, this is a year before Ashura, the way when he read this dua. Uh, yes, it seems to be, yeah, a year before. In any case, in that dua, he says, talking about these levels of recognition of God, he says, "Oh Allah, should I take recourse to your handiwork and from there to deduce that you are the author, because this fine balanced world cannot in and of itself have constructed itself. There has to be a supremely complete and perfect being that is reflecting his handiwork through this wonderfully balanced and precisely working world." He says, "Should I do that when I see you standing before it, beneath it, above it, behind it? What cause do I have to look at your handiwork when I see you so clearly? Can your handiwork be clearer than you in depicting you yourself?" So Hussein Salamullah alayhi at that level was witnessing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at that level of what the masters call mu'ayana, direct vision or direct visioning. So now we might say, well, I'm not there yet. That's fine. We need to have this sense of God that we are moving towards that reality and we need to make it happen. So, how do we make it happen? Of course, we reflect into nature, we do dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but a most effective way is to spend time alone with God as directly one to one, in a one to one relationship. You see, in dhikr, we are calling out the names of God. In reflection, we are looking at the handiwork of God. But we seldom take the time to engage with God privately and directly. Dua was meant to be that very personal, private time spent with God. And that is why we are required at that level of wanting to recognize God and falling in love with Him to take time out and to talk with God, whether that conversation with God is in the form of not the ordained prayers, the prayers that we make ourselves. We say to Allah, Allah, I need you by my side. It has to be articulated by the individual. I need you by my side. Of course, if we can't articulate ourselves or feel it's an alien sort of a thing, then of course read Dua Komail and others that will assist us. But say, oh Allah, I need you by my side. You know what is going on inside me. I don't want to be hidden from you. I have no one but you. Allah, you know my state. I'm embarrassed of myself. Nonetheless, I'm a human. If you don't accept me, then who will? Do not let me come to a point where I have to be hidden from you and shy away from you. I have no friends at that intimate level with whom I can share. To say to God, grant me enough love for you that I'm ready to do anything that you want me to do. But at the same time, oh Lord, I am weak. I will not lie to you. If you were to ask me to fall into hell, I'm not sure if I can do that. To talk with God, no matter how absurd it might sound, but to talk with God. When we engage with God, we feel companionship with God. This person is totally agitating me, and I can't stop hating this person. If that's the thought, let it out. Or I'm terribly in love with this person and I just don't know what to do and I don't want to be in love with that person, or maybe I want to, whatever. But oh Allah, let your love prevail upon my heart to an extent that I feel that needlessness through you. So to engage with God in a very honest manner, either making prayers to God or sharing with God and talking with God. What that does is it actually increases companionship with God. And we begin to recognize God from the depths of our heart, and the whole process of chanting the names of God, reflection upon nature, and this sort of personal private engagement culminates in the gradual recognition of God. I will stop there. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.